Hi everyone, and we're back. Apologies for that adjournment. It's obviously, whilst we're via Zoom, need to make sure that from the governance side that everyone is really clear on what we are voting on. So Councillor Sorais was about to move her motion. Councillor Sorais, if you can just repeat, so it was perhaps I'll get you to move it again just so we're clear for the viewers online in terms of how the wording is going to work in the renumbering. Thank you.
Okay. So I move that Council resolves to A, note the Council officers' responses to submissions received during the public exhibition period of Amendment C207, Attachment A. B, that no action be taken to make Puckle Street one-way until the Puckle Street level crossing has been resolved. C, refer all submissions to Amendment C207 Moon to an independent planning panel in accordance with Section 23 (1) B of the Planning and Environment Act 1987. D, adopt the panel version recommended revisions, Attachment B, for the exhibited Amendment C207 as Council's position to be presented at the independent planning panel. E, adopt a position of support for Amendment C207 in its submission to the independent planning panel, generally in accordance with the Council officer's response to the submissions, Attachment A, and the panel version recommended revisions, Attachment B. F, allow Council officers to make minor editing and typographical changes as required. G, receive a further report following the receipt of the panel report from Planning Panels Victoria to consider recommendations for Amendment C207 Moon. And H, request the Minister for Planning to exercise his powers of intervention under Section 20 (4) of the Planning and Environment Act 1987 to prepare and approve an amendment to the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme by Amendment Schedule 1 to Clause 37.08 Activity Centre Zone to extend the expiry date of the mandatory maximum building heights for precincts 1 to 8 by a minimum of 1 year.
Thank you, Councillor Sorais. Do I have a seconder for Councillor Sorais's motion? Councillor Swipek. Councillor Sorais, would you like to speak on the item?
I would, Madam Mayor. So firstly, I'll just go back a little on where we've come to on this, and that is that the public exhibition for this took place from the 28th of May to the 3rd of July 2020, right in the middle of stage 3 lockdown of the COVID that we've all been living through. There was a notice in The Age, Facebook, I'm not sure who that would have reached. Notice was sent to the owner and occupiers in MPAC, business owners, previous submitters during the informal consultation in April 2019, relevant authorities being Melbourne Water and other key stakeholders, example Woolworths. In my view, from what I've read in the report and the submissions that were made, there were 61, I think, submissions in total. There were 49 objections, and out of those 49, 23 of them related to the Puckle Street one-way proposal that was in this report submitted by our officers. So in regards to those submissions that were made, and I understand that there will be a panel hearing where the objectors can put forward their concerns and whoever objected to that, I think we need to go back to where the problems arise and where they stem from. So I actually did a tour on Friday. I went along Holmes Road, I went over Puckle Street level crossing and had a thought about where I would go if Puckle Street was to become one way. Now I'm told in the report that, you know, it's to help alleviate the junction congestion. Now, whether that's the level crossing congestion or whether that's at Mount Alexander Road congestion, there are other alternatives that could be looked at, and that would be level crossing removal in whichever way that may or may not go. The other issue is that in this report, where it looks at the possible closure of Puckle Street, making it one way, I'm pretty sure in my understanding that we're looking at doing some multi-level car park in Shooter Street. I'm just wondering how cars would be able to get there if Puckle Street was to be made one way, because they couldn't unless they go all the way up Moore Street, round Gladstone Street, into Ascot Vale Road, and then come back down to Puckle Street to get back down to Shooter Street, because that's a one-way street as well. So for me to contemplate the thought of making Puckle Street one way until all these other issues are looked into and resolved, I think we need to not take any action on that proposal until both the level crossing issue has been resolved and the traffic implications are resolved as well. There were other issues in relation to this motion, and that is in relation to a couple of emails that some of the councillors, and myself included, have received in regards to the heights and floor measures of the building development, and it's probably from some of the developers. So whilst I understand that they too are not enamoured with some of the recommendations that are coming through in this report, I've also been advised that they have that opportunity to put their submissions in also at the panel hearing. So for me, this is about not rushing into anything, and let's get our house into order before we start making rash decisions about the proposal. In my studies of Puckle Street, there are areas, and I know that the officers are saying that they'd like to beautify this and make it more pedestrian supportive, etc. There are areas where the footpath has been extended, but all there are yellow boulders that protect people from the actual streetscape. So there has been some car parking taken away from there. I haven't seen any beautification works or landscaping works implemented there in the time that that's been there. There's a lot of argument about the traffic circumstances that may or may not arise out of this. So I have grave concerns about it, and I believe that it needs to be put on hold until all these other issues are rectified.
Thank you, Councillor Sorais. Councillor Sypek. Councillor Sypek, you just need to unmute yourself.
I thought I was unmuted here, sorry.
Yep. No.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The reason why I'm supporting this motion is when it was advertised, yes, it did get exposure to a lot of people, but once the advertising closed, I think the word spread around to a lot of people, and I personally got a lot of phone calls from a lot of residents, phone calls from a lot of traders telling me their situation of why they are not really happy for a one-way street. And with this information in contact, it started concerning me quite a lot, that a lot of the traders and a lot of people who found out afterwards didn't have time or didn't have an opportunity to put in their objections. That's why I started getting a lot of phone calls. I also have been down Puckle Street many, many times, and I sort of wonder, how is a one-way street going to work there? You know, okay, you know, some people might say it's progress. Some people might say, you know, we're reverting back. But we've also got to remember that Puckle Street's one of the main streets in Moonee Valley, and it's always been a two-way street. Everyone knows it as a two-way street, and I personally think that, you know, that would probably be the best outcome. But there's other ways of going around this. I'm happy to support Councillor Sorais' motion to get a bigger and a broader understanding of all this. It's, once again, rushing into things without a full comprehensive report, without a full analysis, is probably not the way to go. I'm happy to find out and wait for further information. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Would any other councillor like to speak on this? Councillor Nation.
Thank you, Mayor, and I apologise, but I am just so confused about this motion that's been put before us. And I think it was only our last meeting, or maybe our meeting prior, that it was discussed. It'd be great to get a little bit of forewarning of motions, at least so the officers would be able to review any motions to see if they're actually consistent with the process. And my fear now is that this motion has not been run past officers, and as such may jeopardise this, not only just the panel hearing, but the ability for us to receive the ministerial exemption and the extension for a year for the C207. So much time and effort has been put in by our council officers over a period of more than 24 months on this. To say that things need to have the checks or balances or needs to be consulted, we don't want to rush into things. I would say rushing into things is throwing a last-minute amendment on the table where the actual amendment, if we're considering the actual amendment here, the amendment says we're not going to take any action, not going to take any action. Now, how is that defined in the purpose of presenting to a panel? Not going to take any action. But then the councillor who moved this motion then says those people who've submitted a response during the exhibition period are going to present to the panel. Now, that doesn't even make sense, because what are they presenting to the panel? Because the motion says we're not going to take any action. I also am really confused, and this is what happens when changes are made at the last minute without the advice of experts. What does the word resolved mean until the level crossing is resolved? Is that saying resolved until something eventually happens there in 30 years' time? Is resolved the state government saying, no, we're not going to do anything? Well, there you go. That's resolved. So I'm just so confused as to where to from here, particularly when the recommendation, the motion, still has references to adopting panel versions, referring all submissions to the independent planning panel, but we've thrown in that reference to Puckle Street. The bigger picture here is that we as a council, with state government funding, have done an extensive amount of work in regards to this activity centre. It's a pilot program for the state government. We are incorporating some ideas like floor area ratio, which haven't even been considered in a lot of other activity centres. We've got the chance to develop such a dynamic heart of our city, and I am so worried now that with this last minute little change that we may actually jeopardise the panel hearing. We may jeopardise the state government turning around and giving us the 12-month extension. Maybe what we're suggesting now, until things are resolved, they might abandon it, and all that effort, time and money that's been put into this process will just be abandoned. I don't have a view as to if a one-way Puckle Street or a two-way Puckle Street is best. I don't, but we have had advice that even if we proceed through this process, we go to panel, we get a panel.
Councillor Nation, sorry, would you like an extension of time?
Just 30 seconds. Just 30
No
seconds.
problems.
If we get a panel report, that doesn't make Puckle Street one way. That's not going to make Puckle Street one way. It still then has to eventually be budgeted, put in with a bit more consultation. It is just a suggestion. We have had officer advice in briefings that is the case, that moving this motion isn't instantly all right Puckle Street one way. It's something that might be off in the never never. But to mess with the process now, I'm really concerned. And I'm really concerned that our officers haven't even had a chance to see if this motion is consistent. I'm really concerned with what even no action or till it is resolved means. If this process gets abandoned because this motion is inconsistent with taking the next step with the panel, I'm going to be mortified. But hey, the 7 councillors here, if 4 vote that way, so be it.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Cusack.
Well, thank you, Councillor Nation, for such a robust defence of the motion that was proposed, or the recommendation that was proposed by the officers. Can I just pick up on your finishing point about consistency? The problem with the amended motion that Councillor Serace has put up and is seconded by Councillor Sypek, is that it is inconsistent with what is actually being proposed for the amendment. The amendment talks about looking at and advocating for options to fix up the rail crossing, and in doing that to connect that potentially to Puckle Street and ultimately to the public transport interchange down on the at the junction. What this motion does is that it says that everything depends on actually some resolution, as you point out, that is undefined of the rail crossing. The rail crossing can only be managed as a state government policy. It is not ours. It obviously relies on state funding and so on like that. And there is no particular dollar on the stump now or any time in the future. So the only reality that we've got is advocacy, and advocacy to get a position sorted out when there is dollars available, not as to put the whole of the amendment in respect of the whether Puckle Street is one way or two way on to spin on one particular thing only, and that is that rail thing. The issue about Puckle Street is many folded. I'll get back to the broad here. This whole amendment has come about because of the spectacular failure of the Moonee Ponds Activity Centre plans going back to 2006, when I came onto this council and started looking at the notion of an activity centre. We have had height limits all over the place. We saw the demolition of many years before that of the market. We saw the failure of this council not to purchase that market site, which in hindsight would have made this council one of the wealthiest councils in the whole of Melbourne, because it was ultimately sold for 3 times the value. But in trying to manage this question of height, the thing that every member of this community sees as an absolute blight on the community, we have to come up with an alternative plan. And as Councillor Mason pointed out, we actually got money from the state government to do that, to create for the first time. I'll need
apologies, Councillor Cusack, would you like some extra time?
Yes, please.
Thank you. You can.
We actually got for the very first time a bucket of money out of the state government to come up with a different way of looking at things. The floor area ratios. We looked at a whole lot of things around beautification, the linking of population into this. For the first time, started to talk about community health and well-being as part of the planning process. We looked at the impact of the Moonee Valley racing course, race course changes. We've looked at the building design, landscape design, streetscape design. These are all parts of the package. Now, if the package can't be seriously entertained by the committee because of this one particular thing, we're in awful bother. We're in absolutely awful bother. I will foreshadow the officer's recommendation as the motion if this matter is lost. Please remember when you're voting that there is already included in the officer's recommendation a way to go forward with the Puckle Street level crossing. It is about advocacy. It's about getting it done in a way that actually recognises the state government role in this and our partnerships with builders, with the federals and with the states. We can't, however, tie Puckle Street's development and change to just one thing. That would be a serious mistake when we're trying to create a nightlife economy, when we're trying to create a better place and a more beautiful Puckle Street.
Councillor Cusack. I think I've been generous with the time. I understand that councillors
Oh, you
don't
have
have
been, Mayor.
clocks. I understand that councillors don't have clocks, so it can be a bit difficult when you start debating. So I fully respect that. Now, and just to confirm, you foreshadowed a motion then, Councillor Cusack, is that correct? Yep. Now, would any other councillor like to speak on this motion? Councillor Sharp.
Madam Mayor, I don't really want to speak at the moment. I just need a point of clarification, if I could, please. Just going back to what Councillor Nation was mentioning regarding the process. I can understand this addition that's been made, but can we please have an officer's response to how this addition will work with the process?
Sure. So I'm not sure that, so through governance you mean, or through planning? Councillor Sharp, would you?
Whoever the correct team is to answer the question. Planning, I suspect.
So are you, your point of clarification is it clear enough? Is that what you're sort of saying?
Councillor Nation mentioned a point quite clearly about the process and about how this motion integrates with the process. So I'm wondering if I can get feedback, please, on how that works.
Look, I will throw to Petrus, Barry, who's one of our senior managers. Petrus, are you available to answer Councillor Sharp's point of clarification in regards to the process?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. It's not totally out of the question, but it would make the process very difficult because many of the maps include that as a one-way, and many of the surrounding developments and proposals in the activity centre relate to Puckle Street being a one-way. So it would affect the proposal extensively if Puckle Street is basically removed, or that proposal is removed from the whole development, because it's an entire area. It's not just one street which is being proposed. So it could throw it in disarray if it does get to the panel.
Noting though that Councillor Thrace isn't removing it, she's just made an addendum. So I'm just wondering how that will play out. I don't believe it's removing it.
Sorry, apologies for that. Removing the fact that it's a one-way from the proposal. So it will still be two ways then until whatever is resolved or confirmed in terms of the level crossing. But it would affect the rest of the proposal and the rest of the activity centre, because it's an entire document, and all the proposals for residential and commercial hinge along those lines. So it's not just one aspect that can just be changed and not having effects on other issues.
So this whole impact hinges on Puckle Street being one way?
No, I wouldn't say that. But if you make a change like that, it would have a bigger effect than just saying Puckle Street is now not going to be one way and it's going to be two way until whenever it changes. It would have other flow-on effects. I can't say that it all just hinges on that. No.
Councillor Sharp, does that answer your point of clarification?
I think so. Thank you.
Did you want to speak to the motion?
Yeah, I guess I will, then, if that's okay. I can understand what Councillor Thrace's intent is of this motion, and I can understand the concerns around it. I guess the way I'm reading it is that, noting the officer comments that was just provided about how this will work in the process, the way I read this motion is that Puckle Street won't progress as a one-way until a level crossing is resolved. But I don't see that as removing that idea from the proposal. I don't think that is what that is intending. From what my read of it, it's just putting it on ice, I suppose, until another issue is resolved. So unless I have that incorrect, but that's how I'm reading that. Yeah, I'd like to see the proposal for Puckle Street widely widely communicated to our municipality. Moonee Ponds is seen as a mecca for our municipality and our neighbourhoods. You know, Moonee Ponds is the CBD of Moonee Valley pretty much. So yeah, I think I'd like a lot more input on that aspect, I guess, personally, but I don't see, unless there's something that I'm missing here, I don't see that this alternative actually changes anything. It just potentially pauses it until another issue is resolved. So, yeah, thank you.
Sorry,
Thank
Mayor,
you.
a point of clarification,
Councillor Sharp.
because obviously I'm just a little bit confused now regarding the motion, given that Councillor Sharp's understanding is different to mine. So my point of clarification is this motion is suggesting that the document that's been exhibited, that we are making changes to that document to make Puckle Street two-way before going to panel. Is that the motion that's before us?
So as a point of clarification, Councillor Sorais is shaking your head in terms of that is not the intention of the motion, but from the way that the words read. I might just, Councillor Sorais, if I could just have a quick response to you from that, but then I might have to go to governance just to confirm.
Yeah, so all I'm saying is that, you know, we don't address, or we don't push forward the notion of making Puckle Street one way until the bigger issue, which is the level crossing, and the reasoning our officers are saying that to convert Puckle Street to one way is because of the significance in the traffic there. Well, that's held up because of level crossing. So we need to address the bigger issues.
Councillor Sorais, sorry, the point of clarification, Councillor Sorais, was, is the motion adjusting the version of the document that has been exhibited before it goes to panel, or are we still going to panel with a document that has Puckle Street as one way?
So the report says that we go with the documents, but in our attachment, the officers are not putting any of their comments in. So what I'm saying is that we don't take action on Puckle Street until the level crossing has been addressed, and that would be submitted when it goes to the panel.
So, Councillor Sorais, I guess, I'm sorry to ask this for a third time, but just I still don't have a definitive answer from you. The document that is going to the panel, will that have, as a result of your motion, everything exactly as it is, as presented here in the attachments, or will that have a version where Puckle is back at two ways?
What will be submitted to the panel is what's in the attachments A and B. But what I'm saying out of those attachments is that no action be taken until the level crossing issue is resolved.
So again, another point of clarification, sorry, Mayor. So no action being taken, is that intending that we are not going to proceed to the panel stage until the level crossing is resolved?
No, because this is about the entire impact. It's not just about one issue. However, this is the one issue that I'm making a statement on and putting forward in support of the objections that came through and the feedback that we've had. And as Councillor Sharp said earlier, this needs to go to a broader community. As I said earlier, this was advertised during a time where we've been in COVID.
Councillor Sorais, we're just trying to answer the point of clarification. We're not debating.
I'm answering it.
Well, Councillor Sorais, my question was, point of clarification was, is the next step going to panel? And you've just then said the next step would be going out to the broader community, which is not going to panel.
No, so in essence, go to the panel. I said that to you, and then I also added on, as Councillor Sharp had said, that we need to perhaps maybe include the fact that it needs to go to a wider community to get a broader access, because it's not just utilised by the immediate people in Moonee Ponds and the businesses and the stakeholders.
Okay, Councillor So, right, Councillor Nation, does that answer your point of clarification?
I guess, and if it needs to go through officers, and sorry to go one more time, but I'm still unsure of the intent of the mover of the motions in regards to if we are still going to panel as the next step with all the documents and all the submissions as per what would have been the normal process before this amendment, before this motion came, or if that timeline is then being changed, because obviously we've exhibited, you can't just go change things and you have to re-exhibit, etc. So I just want to understand from officers what the timeline would be as a point of clarification.
Yes, so I will throw to Officer Petrus Barry again, who might be able to answer the point of clarification from Councillor Nation in regards to if this motion reads that it goes to panel, and then how community consultation could possibly be worked into that, if that actually could happen. Petrus Barry, if you're online.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, the first point about community consultation is obviously that the caretaker period is starting shortly, so community consultation probably wouldn't be able to take place before the elections, because anything that goes out to the community will have amended plans will have to be compiled to show any changes before the community is involved in that. If it does go to the panel in a way that where Puckle isn't indicated as one way, it would also require amendments from council. Some of the studies may have to be redone in terms of the traffic components. Our consultants, for example, are basing most of their arguments when they go to the panel to defend it on Puckle being one way. So they'd have to change their opinion, their professional opinion, to support that position, then that the one way not be pursued anymore, at least at this stage. So it could be quite problematic when it does go to the panel, and including the community would delay it extensively, I'd think.
Okay, thank you. And the attachments haven't been amended. The attachments haven't been amended either.
No, they haven't, because they all show Puckle as one way, and all the reports also point to that, the traffic reports and all the other design reports.
Thank you. Councillor Nation, does that answer your point of clarification?
Yes, so Mr. Barry's made it quite clear that if we were to have the motion that is before us now, it would jeopardise the panel process and delay it. So he's made that explicitly clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. So just to confirm, Councillor Nation, sorry, just 1 second, Councillor Cusack. Councillor Sharp, had you finished speaking when Councillor Nation came through with the point of clarification?
No, probably not. I don't know. Actually, it's still gotten all muddled up, I think.
Yeah. Sorry, I will come back to you, but I think, Councillor Cusack, have you asked for another point of clarification?
Yes, I mean, there is a suggestion now about the potential to go out to wide consultation with this proposal.
Councillor Cusack, we're just looking
hang
for...
on. So
the point of clarification?
Point of clarification is around the last point, which is about the request for the minister to exercise his power to extend the doings for another 12 months. And what are the implications of going for further community consultation and the impact on the ministers, or the impact that would have on the request of the minister?
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Petrus Barry, Manager of Strategic Planning, if I could ask for you to respond to that.
Thank you, Mayor. The issue of the mandatory building heights could potentially be extended in a separate resolution, or it runs in a way, it runs separate to the rest of the process. So that has been extended so that the whole process of the panel could be resolved. We could get the minister to extend it by a further number of months. Given that this is a process which the minister is encouraging council to complete, and it's something that they've identified Moonee Valley as a good candidate for as this pilot. I know there might be a chance that the minister indicates that they don't want to extend it because they are very keen to get this resolved. So I can't really say whether they would allow a further extension to the 1 year.
Okay. Councillor Cusack, does that answer your point of clarification?
To the extent that we'll remain in the wilderness.
Yeah. Now we'll go back to Councillor Sharp.
Thank you. I think my comment about consultation may have been a bit, exploded a little bit. It was just an off-the-cuff comment, but I would like to see this issue, I suppose, more widely consulted with, but I'm not asking for that, and I don't think the motion has been altered to reflect that. So that was just an off-the-cuff comment by me, and I dare say that the further community consultation on this idea for Puckle Street particularly will happen in the future. Yeah, I can see the concerns. Like, I can see the concerns. I can see both sides, and I can also see Councillor Sorase's intention. And like I said, unless I've completely got it wrong, but all I see is there's nothing changing in this report other than us not progressing the one-way situation until we have more resolution on Puckle Street. Otherwise, nothing else changes. So that's how I'm reading it, and yeah, I think I've had clarification on that, so I'm happy, but I just thought I needed to put the community consultation issue to bed because I think that's an entirely different issue to a degree. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Now, would any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Lawrence.
Sorry, Madam Mayor. I apologise for dropping out before. My internet went haywire, and I'm now back on a different computer. Look, this is a vexed question, and certainly one that involves considerable thought process. The one-way street in Puckle Street, from what I can gather from the survey that was done of those that chose to answer the consultation process, was certainly against having a one-way street from Puckle Street. Business in Moonee Ponds Activity Centre, like the rest of Moonee Valley, have doing it really tough at the moment, and have been for probably since February. So creating a one-way Puckle Street precinct is generally, and these are the people that I talk to be I pardon the pun, for Puckle Street to go. I certainly can only, I mean, I don't run a business in Puckle Street, they do, and this is the feedback that I'm hearing. Business traders are not wanting congestion in Puckle Street, but the surrounding streets is by congestion in Puckle Street and the surrounding streets, and it's not going to be fixed by making Puckle Street necessarily a one-way street. I mean, I can probably see worse congestion happening as a direct result of that. That's just in my own mind. I think, and the point was mentioned earlier, and I forget which councillor mentioned it, but the traders and probably the community generally who drive to the Puckle Street precinct, and it is our CBD, and I like that term, Councillor Sharp, that you used, that the Moonee Ponds Activity Centre is our CBD for Moonee Valley, and we need to get this right. But taking that to the next level and again, as I said, the traders and the community, they're asking for this multi-storey development car park, be it in Shooter Street or the top end of Hall Street or wherever. But we need more parking, essentially, to look after the movement of customers in and out of the area. That's going to help the coffee shops, the restaurants, the giftware shops, the grooming shops, and so forth, so that these businesses can have customers on their doorstep. I don't know the answer in terms of this one way. I can see the point that Councillor Saras is making in relation to the congestion that's caused by the boom gates being down at Puckle Street / Holmes Road, and that causes problems to the movement of traffic in and around the area. So, I mean, we've got to put the horse before the cart, and that would be, the other aspect. I understand a lot of work's gone into this Impact to 2040 process.
Councillor Lawrence, I'm mindful of the time. I have given people extensions. I'm happy for you to have an extension, but just to let you know, just another minute.
Yeah, thank you. And I won't be too long. But as I say, we have to put the horse before the cart, and if we can get the right answer on the level crossing, then maybe the whole Moonee Ponds Community Centre can actually thrive even greater than what we wanted it to do. And that really got to consider going forward, and one that doesn't go away. Councillor, I'm not sure which councillor mentioned it, but they said dissolve mean. Well, to me means to decide firmly a course of action. So it's a pretty simple thing to understand. I guess if delay does occur with this whole process, and we have extensive and correct community consultation, then delay will be required, and that's the democratic process, and that's the process that we've got to have to do things correctly. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for the extension.
No problems. Thank you, Councillor Lawrence.
Sorry, Councillor Byrne, I'd like to move an amendment.
Yes, you can move. What is your amendment, Councillor Nation?
Thank you. So my amendment would be the addition of a point I, and it reads, for the sake of clarity of process, Council will still proceed to panel with the documents as per the attachments in the report.
Documents.
I'll
Did everybody catch that?
I'll just read it
thank
again.
you, Councillor Nation.
So it'd be the addition of a point I, noting that the letters have changed, obviously, with the current motion. So the addition of point I, which reads, for the sake of clarity of process, Council will still proceed to panel with the documents as per the attachments in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Can I just get a general nod of the head to make sure everyone understands point I and the amendment? I don't believe that's contrary to what the motion that was moved, so I'm happy to accept it as an amendment. I will need a seconder for that amendment. Councillor Cusack. Councillor Nation, would you like to speak to the amendment?
I will, thank you, Mayor. So I guess the motivation for this amendment is because throughout the discussion on the original motion, there seems to be a bit of either disagreement or unknown of exactly what the next step is. And I note that from many of the speakers, they're extremely passionate about parking, traffic, one-way, etc. I'm most concerned about the potential for this entire process to potentially get abandoned And that's the worry that we've exhibited. And by there being vagaries in this motion, we might not be able to get to the next stage. So basically, this amendment is to spell out, so there's express clarity that, and it says for the sake of clarity, so we're still proceeding to panel with the documents exactly as they were attached in the report. So it means council officers don't have to go and do any revisions. That will allow the process to proceed. And then, obviously, the rest of the motion includes Councillor Sorace's reference to one way of Puckle Street, and then that can be looked at separately to the process. But this is just ensuring that we proceed to the panel, all the documents as per have been prepared, and that still allows Councillor Sorace to note her concerns about the one way and to advocate and resolve that further down the track. I just don't want the process to get abandoned. This is 2 years. I don't want there to be any officers not knowing how to act on this motion. So this is basically, hopefully, just spelling out exactly what has been discussed, and hopefully there's enough of a consensus here that we can include this amendment and then just get on with the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Councillor Cusack.
Councillor Nation, we've had our blues in the past, but and I thoroughly recommend to everybody that your amendment be accepted. When you say documents, this is quite a healthy pack of documents. It's obviously contains the proposals from the officers. It contains all of the objections and supporting documents provided by the community at this point, who include the traders of Puckle Street and other residents of the Moonee Ponds Central Business District area. And it also contains our expert advice from a number of architects, traffic engineers, and so on like that. It also picks up and advises on all of that other social context that I mentioned before, which includes the massively growing population of Moonee Ponds and the extension into the Moonee Valley Racing Club. So I applaud you and this motion. I want that assuredness that you want, which is that everything is actually on the table in front of the panel, and that the panel can consider what the officers put forward, which was about advocacy on the rail versus only one solution will ever be entertained for Puckle Street's one-wayness, and that is if the rail crossing is resolved, whatever that means. And the panel will have to guess what that actually means. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Would any other councillor like to speak on the amendment? Councillor Sorace.
Now, I'm pretty sure that in the motion that I moved, items C and D read, C reads, refer all submissions to Amendment C207 to an independent planning panel in accordance with Section 23(1)(b) of the Planning Environment Act, and adopt the panel version recommended revisions attachment B to the exhibited amendment. In our attachment, we have everything written about what the officers' views are on the Puckle Street one way. So there's nothing to clarify here. It's already in the motion that I originally moved. So to turn around and say, for the sake of clarity of process, council will still proceed to the panel with the documents as per attachments in the report is actually covered in the motion that I moved. I'm not saying let's not remove the officer's report or anything, because actually in the officer's report in the recommendation, they say no changes to Amendment C207 with regards to Puckle Street. So I don't understand why this amendment is coming forward when I've already got it in the motion that I originally moved. Maybe I'm seeking point of clarification.
So your point of clarification, I believe you're asking why has this been...
Why we're reinforcing an item on the motion that I moved, seeking clarity of that item.
Councillor Sorais, there was definitely obviously discussions around the chamber where people were unclear in terms of whether it would go to consultation or whether it would hold the panel process. So it is as per the point of clarification for the sake of clarity of process. So I think it is, that's...
This had nothing to do with consultation. Councillor Nation's amendment was for the sake of clarity of process.
Correct.
The council will still proceed to the panel with the documents as per attachments in the report. And that is included in items C and D that I had moved in the original motion. I'm just saying it's double dipping, or it's coming across as just double supporting what's already in my motion that was on the floor.
Thank you, Councillor Sorais. Would any other councillor like to speak on the amendment? No. There was opposition to the amendment, Councillor Nation.
I guess, and noting Councillor Sorais is concerned about double dipping or double supporting, I guess we've spent 40 minutes, and after that 40 minutes, there was still councillors unsure about exactly what the next step was. So to ensure that officers tomorrow morning can act on this motion and act on it knowing that they are fulfilling the resolution of council, then there is absolutely no harm in just spelling out, for the sake of clarity, the next steps in the process. Better to be safe than sorry, and it's important that officers have clear direction, and if that means adding an amendment so they have clear direction, then happy to do it, because...
Apologies, Councillor Nation. Movers of an amendment don't have a right of reply to...
Thank you. I got a bit in anyway. Thank you.
Sorry, apologies for that. So I will put the amendment to the vote. Now this is just the Councillor Nation's amendment. All those in favour? That is Councillor Byrne, Councillor Cusack, Councillor Nation, and all those against. Councillor Sharp, Councillor Lawrence, Councillor Sipek, Councillor Sorais. So that amendment is lost. Now we will go back to the substantive motion. Now, in terms of the substantive motion, Councillor Sorais, Councillor Sipek, Councillor Nation, Councillor Cusack, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Lawrence have spoken. And unless there are any other amendments, and as the amendment was not passed, Councillor Sorais, there was opposition, so you can close.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't care how long it takes to take this issue. This is a major issue. And as far as I'm concerned, it needs to be dealt with properly. So for our officers in the report, in attachment A of our report, under the recommendations from our officers, where submitters have put in objections to Puckle Street being one way, under the recommendations from our officers, it says no changes to Amendment C207 Moon are recommended. So what I'm actually saying is, and their responses are a little bit conflicting to what the residents are saying, or the shopkeepers. I don't know who the objectors were, but I'm only going by what our feedback and input from the community, whoever they be, has come to. So for me, going down and looking at it, this whole precinct in the last 2 years has changed dramatically. So Homer Street, Hall Street, Margaret Street, Eddy Street, the proposals in the future for Shooter Street, they all, in our current situation, have a huge impact on any proposal of making Puckle Street one way. And together with what Councillor Lawrence has said, in that the businesses, who knows who's even going to recover from there, if we're even going to have any businesses along Puckle Street in the long term. But for me, I think that until the Puckle Street crossing has been dealt with, and there's a lot of other issues to be considered, and I'm sure they will come forward at the panel by those objectors. I'm just concerned that we don't continue to pursue that side of it until these other issues have been resolved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sorais. I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Sharp, Councillor Lawrence, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Sorais. All those against? Councillor Byrne, Councillor Cusack, Councillor Nation. That motion is carried. Governance, I will ask for Councillor Marshall and Councillor Gachi-Marici to please come back into the chamber. Thank you. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I do believe we may, we've got Councillor Sypek. We may have lost Councillor Cusack along the way. He may have dropped out for connection issues, but we do have the people back from the Zoom waiting room. So we will move on to item 10.6, which is titled the Amendment C200 Moon Heritage Controls Post-Exhibition Consideration of Submissions. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Marshall.
Sorry, I'm checking. I'm still in the meeting of the 25th of August.
Just.
Okay. I'd like to move a motion in the form of the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. And do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Sharp. Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak on the motion?
I will. And what we have here is a report detailing the outcomes of the consultation of our latest round of the Heritage Gap exhibition. And it's the continuation of work that started over 6 years ago. And the material was put out on exhibition and people have had the opportunity to provide submissions, and then officers have considered those submissions, and that's how these processes go. You have opportunities to have your input a number of times in the process. So during exhibition processes like this, particularly heritage ones, when you're relying on information provided by individual property owners, you do gather lots of information that does sometimes change whether a property should be included, whether it should be considered to be contributory or non-contributory, a range of other things. And I think we received about 120 submissions in the end. For people who'd like to find out a bit more about how these heritage processes work, I really recommend that you have a look at the report. It sets out how the different processes work and how decisions in the heritage space around grading and permit exemptions and things like that apply. And it's actually it's really important too to note that we do have a heritage exemption policy, so that there are a range of things that people can do to their property without a permit. And we actually have some good information on our website. There's a couple of videos and things like that that might actually help people understand the heritage process a bit more and bust some of those myths that there are around heritage. Now, one of the things that you invariably receive when we go through this process are requests after the officers have considered submissions, requests from individuals to actually either take their property out or change whether they're contributory or non-contributory. And I suppose it's one of those things that with the benefit of experience as a councillor, that we've had situations in the past where there's been probably tweaking of properties, pulling them in and out, no doubt at the request of property owners. And then those things come back to bite future councils. So we have situations where an owner might go and sell their property to a developer or someone else, and then the request comes in to demolish it. And then the whole thing goes, well, hang about, why didn't you include this in the heritage study, or why hasn't this got heritage overlays? And then we madly put up notices of motion or whatever it might be to try and get heritage controls in place. So for me in this situation, rather than us starting to pull properties out where officers have advised to leave them in, I would rather it go to a panel. So that panel process, people will be able to put their submissions there. Panel processes aren't intimidating, and that's one of the really positive things about them. Panel members are invariably used to dealing with members of the public, and they're informal in a sense of processes, so they're not scary. So people will have the ability to go there and say, I did this, and this is the reason why I don't think my property should be included. And for me, I'd much prefer that process in relation to the heritage space, because then at the end of it, we'll have recommendations from the panel of heritage experts that say, well, having considered all the evidence, we believe blah. And that fits much better with me. As I said, given we've had that situation where properties don't have a heritage overlay or not within the heritage overlay, and then you look through the history and it seems that someone's pulled it out. In light of that, I'm happy to move the motion in the form of the officer's recommendation to send this piece of work off to panel and to see what comes out of that. And again, it's really nice to feel that we've got another part of that heritage process that's happened in Moonee Valley, and I'm really pleased that that's the case.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Happy to concur with Councillor Marshall. Look, heritage within Moonee Valley is of vital importance to the majority of residents, I believe. It's certainly a passion of mine, but on the flip side, I do very much understand that it can be a very vexed issue for
Councillor Sharp, your sound has dropped out. Councillor Sharp? Councillor Sharp? Councillor Sharp, sorry, I'm not sure if you can hear me. Your sound has dropped out, Councillor Sharp.
Am I back on? Yep.
You're back.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I spent the afternoon going through the comments from residents who have been earmarked throughout this process as to have a heritage overlay, and I looked at all the officer comments, and like I said, it is a vexed issue. But following on from what Councillor Marshall said, I think the best process here is to take it to panel where the experts look at all the issues surrounding the individual properties. It's very individualised. So I think that is obviously the best part of the most appropriate way to go forward on this. But I guess to the residents that may have submitted that they want their home removed from a potential overlay, please don't think that we disregard your comments. It's just that heritage is a significant issue in Moonee Valley, as I said, and it's an issue that we are constantly striving to achieve. We're trying to achieve a more concise and comprehensive heritage listing, and we're trying to protect our heritage properties at the end of the day. Obviously, we all know that we are an inner city council and we are ripe for development in some parts of our municipality, but often in those parts of the municipality there are significant heritage properties that absolutely warrant protection. And unfortunately, over the years, we've done a number of gap studies, but sometimes some of those properties have been missed. So, gee, I think we've been working on heritage overlay now pretty much since I've got onto council. I think the first, Councillor Marshall probably championed this when, back 2014 or so. So I'm not sure of the year, but anyway, suffice to say, we've been working on this for quite a number of years and making good progress, but happy to see this go forward to the panel where the experts can look at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sorais. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? No. Oh, Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I'll be very brief. I mean, heritage to me is, and it is to most people, is history. And we've had a lot of loss of our history in Moonee Valley over a period of probably the last 30 or 40 years. And if we keep losing it and keep demolishing buildings that we potentially would have liked to have kept, and there are a lot that have disappeared over time, and I can think of a few that I know of that I would have really loved to have seen maintained. And it's just, that's what we're losing when we lose our heritage. We lose our history, and I guess that's the critical aspect to me in all of this. I like heritage controls. I think it gives us a level of comfort, I guess, that we are retaining our history. We are keeping what we need and what we treasure as local people. There's a lot to be said for that, and a lot that we have to really be proud of in terms of, you know, the local area that we live in, be that Flemington, be that Essendon, be that Strathmore. We have to retain that, and the next generation and the next generation after that will hopefully say, well, look at that council back in 2020, look what they did for us. So I hope they do, because that to me is what this is all about. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Nation.
Thanks, Mayor. So I just wanted to reiterate the points of some of the other councillors that have spoken, and obviously thank those residents who have lodged a submission. I think it's probably, for a lot of people, the concept of protecting the heritage of our suburbs is a really positive prospect until potentially you're getting a heritage listing on your house, and you may know that there are elements of it which would not warrant heritage control. So I note that everyone who will have submitted as part of this process, that for some of them there might be concerns that either their precinct is not a complete precinct, or that there are elements of their property which may on a drive-by or a desktop summary look to be of the era, but they may be recent additions. So, and I will note as well that I did have residents of, a couple of residents of Brown Ave point that out to me as well, particularly with their precinct. On discussion with officers, and particularly in discussion with Councillor Marshall, who is a mover of this this motion, it was discussed whether or not properties could be taken in and out, and in order to do the process justice, the advice from officers and with our discussions was that going to panel would be the best step, to give everyone the chance to obviously present, and allow a panel of experts to review each of those submissions and each of those properties. And I think Councillor Marshall said it really well, that going to panel is not intended to be a too intimidating process. Ultimately, everyone just wants the best result for that particular property. So definitely, if you have submitted and you do have concerns about your property being included, the panel's the chance to discuss those. If you are living in a 100-year-old house that we want to preserve as a council, unfortunately, maybe your submission will fall on deaf ears. But if you do have valid points, then obviously they will be listened to before the final report is presented. So again, I thank everyone for taking the time to lodge their submissions, those that called me as well today. And let me assure you, the next proper step will be going to panel. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? No, I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Item 10.7 on the agenda is the Moonee Valley Heritage Study 2020. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Marshall.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll move a motion in the form of the officer's recommendation in relation to A and C, then move B 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 as per the officer's recommendation, and then insert an additional Roman numeral 7, which reads as follows. The following additional properties are to be added to the study with their inclusion a result of a community nomination. And then these will be numbered 1, etc. 67 to 69 Narvino Street in conjunction with the Addison Street properties, Moonee Ponds, including as a possible extension to HO 316. 2, 10 to 66 and 15 to 63 North Street, Ascot Vale, including as a possible extension to HO 21. 3, 71 to 73 Maribyrnong Road, Ascot Vale, including as a possible extension to HO 15. 4, 77 Ardmillan Road, Moonee Ponds. 5, 7 to 9 George Street, Moonee Ponds. 6, 102 Holmes Road, Moonee Ponds. 7, 92 Eglinton Street, Moonee Ponds. 8, 98 Eglinton Street, Moonee Ponds. 9, 2 Ethel Street, Moonee Ponds. 10, 39 Edward Street, Essendon. 11, 55 Bent Street, Moonee Ponds. Then 12 to read the following properties as a precinct itself and or east side of Lock Street in brackets 10 to 20 and 18 Riverview Road as an extension to the Riverview and Trinford precinct. A, 10, so that's capital A, 10 Lock Street, Essendon in brackets and for possible individual inclusion. B, 18 Riverview Road, Essendon in brackets for possible and for possible individual inclusion. C, 9 to 15 Lock Street, Essendon. D, 14 to 16 Lock Street, Essendon in brackets and for possible individual inclusion. E, 18 to 20 Lock Street, Essendon. 13, 17 Tennyson Street, Moonee Ponds, including as a possible extension to HO 11. 14 Flemington Bridge in brackets and to liaise with the City of Melbourne in relation to this. 15, 3 to 11 The Crescent, 1A to 81 and 20 to 76 Bloomfield Road, 7 to 41 Roxburgh Street, Ascot Vale, in brackets including as a possible extension to HO 305. 16, 12 to 30 Maribyrnong Road, 298 to 310 Ascot Vale Road, Moonee Ponds, including as a possible extension to HO 16. 17, 635 to 639A Mount Alexander Road, Moonee Ponds, in brackets including as a possible extension to HO 14. 18, 177 Buckley Street, Essendon. 19, 2 to 24 Eglinton Street, Moonee Ponds, in brackets including as a possible extension to HO 309. And 20, following properties including as a potential precinct, 20 and 23 Thomas Street, 2 to 26 and 19 to 49 McPherson Street, 21 to 27 and 22 to 32 Wilson Street, 12 to 30 and 17 to 21 Bent Street, 18 to 30 Salisbury Street, 7 to 35 and 12 to 22 Primrose Street, 1 to 15 and 2 to 14 Tennyson Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. You might need a glass of water after that one. Now, that was circulated to councillors. Can I just get a general nod that everyone is clear on what the motion is? Yeah, it looks like there's a general nod. And I will ask for a seconder for that motion. Councillor Sharp. Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak on the motion?
Look, I'll speak briefly other than to say that we are continuing the heritage work. We've done an enormous amount as part of the gap study, but there are a whole range of other properties that have been identified as needing further study, and they're set out in the report. But we've also got these additional properties that have been nominated by individuals. And I really would like to acknowledge in particular Adam Ford and Moonee Valley Heritage Action and David Harper. Those two individuals have been constant in their vigilance and have spent so much of their own time actually going around looking at properties, sending in nominations, and they both very much care deeply about the heritage. And we're certainly indebted to you for all the work that you've done out of your own, in your own time, voluntarily, in relation to heritage in Moonee Valley. So thank you for that. So we'll move, as has been indicated in the report, to stage 2 assessments of the places listed in the report and the various other themes, if you like. And then that process will continue. So I won't go too much into that because most of you who are interested in heritage will be aware that it can be a lengthy process, but we certainly need to keep the ball rolling. And I grew up in a house where one of the big rules was you don't toot your own horn. So I won't do that, but I think our council can quite rightly say between the work done in this council and the work done in the last council that we have done more for heritage than probably all of the other councils combined. And I think that that's something we can wear as a badge of honour. And, you know, it's not always easy, the heritage work. There's always some developer who's got a site on a corner block with a very beautiful old building who wants to knock it down and put up apartments. But I think we can all be rightly really proud of the work that we've done, and this sets the ball rolling for future work. So I certainly will look forward to seeing what comes out of it.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Happy to concur. I think considering I spoke on the last item, happy to progress this 2020 study. Can you hear me? Yes, 2020 study, and acknowledge the huge list that Councillor Marshall added in there. I certainly look forward to seeing what happens at the next stage, and look forward to seeing how these magnificent houses progress. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Cusack.
Just very briefly, I note that one of the key areas in terms of the future studies is the post-war houses. And this is an area that was raised some years ago by this council, and a number of places were identified. And the council backed off from going any further with it after a number of residents made representations to council. And it's interesting that, well, we're having to go back and revisit this. These houses are now 80 odd years old. They represent a time in Australia where our history wasn't so brilliant because there were a lot of relatively poor people. And talk about the baby boomers, most of them were brought up in these pretty modest, maybe often 2-bedroom brick houses and weatherboard houses. And our municipality abounds in them. I'll be interested to see how we go this time around. But on the other hand, again, I support and want to echo the work and words of Councillor Marshall and Councillor Sharp in seconding this motion, that there is a lot to be done. There is a fantastic effort that's been made so far, that people from the Moonee Valley Heritage group have just been terrific in all of this, and that I think the considerations now, maybe 10 years on from that other experience, have changed somewhat. But we've got some opportunities that are really fabulous right now, and I'm looking forward to seeing the outcomes of this study in the future, and hopefully some really fine action come of it, because we have an opportunity to get right in front of the ball here, as you say, where a lot of other councils aren't there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Sorais.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Just in relation to this, I'll be seeking maybe a point of clarification or just an answer to a question on this. Item 5, you've got in your motion, the following additional properties are to be added to the study with their inclusion as a result of a community nomination. So I just needed that clarified as to whether all the properties that Councillor Marshall that you've mentioned were in fact coming from a community nomination or from the property owners themselves.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall.
From community nominations.
Okay, so that kind of, it concerns me a little, because I don't know if others have, but I've had emails.
So, Councillor Sorais, you're now speaking to the motion?
Yep. So in regards to that, it concerns me with community nominations, and I'm all for heritage, don't get me wrong, and protection of properties, etc. But I kind of feel that that's inflicting a responsibility on a person's private property. So that in itself concerns me on even a previous motion that went through with regards to residents that wanted their property withdrawn from that C200 heritage control item. But, and of course, they've got the opportunity to go to a panel, as Councillor Marshall has said, to oppose that and say and do what they want. I just feel that there's an exhaustive amount of properties in here, and I haven't seen them all and haven't been to them all, and I'm pretty sure that the community nominations have perhaps put in their 2 bobs worth with regards to all this. But the other side of that concerns me that, yes, there probably are most of those properties that would like their properties listed in the heritage study. However, who are these people, I suppose, to make comment about what another person's property should or shouldn't be? That's all. That's my only reservations. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Sorais. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? No. Well, as there was opposition, Councillor Marshall, I will allow you to close.
Thank you, Mayor. I would say that with heritage processes, the number of times those heritage processes kick off because of an owner nomination would be maybe, I don't know, I'd take a guess and say 0.001%. These processes invariably kick off because officers and community members, regardless of whether it's this process or another process, heritage experts say, okay, well, let's look at these properties. So I'm not dismissing your concerns, Councillor Sorais, at all. But again, this is a process. These people who own the property will have that opportunity to put in their submissions, even before it goes, all the way through and say, well, look, really from the street, this might look like blah, but it's actually, it's a reproduction or whatever it might be. So there are lots of checks and balances in these heritage processes, as there needs to be. But I think this is often the way that these things do happen through nominations. Really, I'm trying to think if I've seen a nomination by an owner. I can't recall one. There may have been one, but yeah, so I think that's the thing for me. This is about saying, okay, let's go through the process. You'll have your opportunity to provide that information that, go through that data collection process. And, there will always be people who own property who just don't care about the house. They care about the land value. They want to knock it down. And that's where, again, this is one of those situations that is about that greater good. And it's about that protection of the history of Moonee Valley. It's about that protection of special neighbourhoods where these properties are really largely intact, and the neighbourhood itself, the street itself, has a special feel. So while not dismissing your concerns, there will be opportunities through this process for people to address those concerns if the properties aren't suitable of having a heritage overlay.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Item 10.8 on tonight's agenda is the review of water sensitive urban design voluntary contribution scheme. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Marshall.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move a motion in the form of the officer's recommendation as to paragraphs A and B, and then to have C read as follows: receive the next review of the water sensitive urban design voluntary contribution scheme, including a review of the scheme rate and a full analysis of the first 24 months of the operation, communication and stakeholder understanding of the scheme by 30 June 2021.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sypek. Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak on the motion?
Yes, please. So this is an update in the report about the water sensitive urban design voluntary contribution scheme that we set up about 12 months ago. And basically what the scheme's designed to do is to allow planning applicants to do most of the water sensitive urban design on site. And then for that last part, if they'd like to make a financial contribution. And the view has been then that council will be able to use that money in larger projects, larger scale projects that will provide significant water sensitive urban design benefits, if you like, and provide a much greater community benefit by having those bigger projects. So the report indicates that 52 applicants have used the scheme to date, and it's a relatively modest 8%. So most planning applicants at this stage are still choosing to meet their obligations on site. And again, the report indicates that we've collected about $156,000. And that's sitting in its own special fund, ready to be used for appropriate projects. It's fair to say that the scheme has underperformed in the sense that not as many people have taken up the opportunity as was anticipated. And I think what will be good in another 12 months' time for this to come back, we'll by then have 2 years of data. obviously might need to factor in some COVID-19 consideration in relation to that. But that 2 years of data and doing that greater discussion around what do people understand this to mean, what do they see as the benefits, all of that sort of stuff, I think will be incredibly beneficial to the next council, who will then be able to decide, okay, well, is this scheme working as planned? And if not, do we need to make adjustments to it? So I'm happy with the idea of having further another year to see how it plays out, and then the council to receive a report back.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Sypak.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I second this motion, and I sort of disagree with Councillor Marshall in regards to one point, that the scheme hasn't been taken up as well as it has. With the advertising that we've been doing towards it, and I don't think we've actually properly sold this whole idea to the builders, because by the time the builders actually get their plans and the developers get their plans, the architects have already drawn up a certain way of how they were going to use it, and then for them to then retrofit and readjust the plans to suit with some of the designs that could be saved, and pay that way. So I think the extension of the 12 months is a great idea, and I think it should be advertised a little bit better to some of the, the draftsmen and the architects that are actually drawing a lot of these plans, and get them to be thinking more about how they could be saving and how they could be doing different things with environmental planning of these developments. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sypak. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Cusack.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Marshall, for your amendment to C, because I think the critical part in all of that is the question of evaluation, and having a couple of years worth is a very powerful tool for the next council stepping up to have a consideration about this. There is a potential, if I can just drift for a second, there's a potential downside to this contribution scheme, and that is that we can also have developers who just get lazy and sort of say, well, listen, I've done enough in this design and I'll flick you a few bucks and off you go. The upside to that, of course, is that the scheme can be used to innovate and actually address really green considerations in this community, and potentially to come up with opportunities to address very difficult sites and make new things come to the fore and work. So the current what do you call it? The current trend, or the current fad, sorry, is often around rain gardens. Now, I'm not knocking rain gardens, but on the other hand, they're done to the exclusion almost of any other sort of idea. And so there are plenty of other ways to look at water sensitive design and to make it work. And we should be encouraging those. And this is what this scheme can actually start to do if it's used really inventively and very cleverly. And if we take on board 2 years worth of experience and find how that money might be implemented and used, we could go a long way in this council to starting to change planning views, or views of planners and views of designers and views of builders, the kinds of things that Councillor Sypak alluded to, and turn them around through really practical showpiece examples of what really can be done. So there's a great opportunity within this, and I think the scheme is well worth persevering with, and it could grow and become, as I said, a showpiece with the right kind of work and the right kind of thinking about the evaluation.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Sorais.
A couple of words. I think I support the recommendation, and I think it's important, given our financial situation and looking at ways and means of being able to get financial contribution. I think that this is a great opportunity. As the report says, the financial contribution goes towards the delivery of larger scale, water sensitive urban design projects built and managed by the council to treat stormwater pollutants equivalent to the treatment that would have been required to treat on site. And it goes on about so many other ways and means that we can utilise this funding, which is actually $55 per square metre rate, covers the cost to council to administer the scheme and to design, construct and maintain the council WSUD assets that are built under the scheme. So I support the recommendation, and I think that's a fantastic opportunity for council to utilise the funds in a great way.
Thank you, Councillor Thrace. Any other councillor? Councillor Lawrence.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Look, I agree with this motion, and I think it's a worthwhile one to continue with. We utilise a lot of our stormwater in our parks, and people probably don't realise that Napier Park up in Strathmore is pretty much water recycled from gutters and the like that goes back into the park. We're doing the same thing at Rosehill Park up in the Rosehill ward, and that's a great initiative, and also in Woodlands Park in my own ward in Buckley. So these are the type of things we can do in response to developers not being able to do their own water sensitive urban use. And I also like the fact that this is a voluntary scheme. Sometimes forcing people to do things is not always in the best interest of everybody concerned, and yet we've had a voluntary contribution scheme where they're actually coming out of the woodwork to take it up. So I hope it continues, I hope it expands, and I think it's a great thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? No. Councillor Marshall, there was potentially, I don't know if they were opposition sort of comments from Councillor Sypek, but I will allow you to address them if you would like. No? Shake of the head. In that case, I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? Yep, that is carried unanimously. Item 10.9 on the agenda is the response to petition Columban Avenue, Strathmore. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Gauchemarici.
I'd like to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Gauchemarici. And a seconder? Councillor Lawrence's hand first. Councillor Gauchemarici, would you like to speak on the item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The report is fairly self-explanatory, but the brief history. So I presented a petition to council last year from the residents who were interested in having some more parking restrictions applied. The report on that petition came back to us and said it's not really warranted, but there was still significant interest from the residents in having restrictions applied. So we included a survey of residents to really understand that. The survey was sent out and that response has come back, but the response hasn't been significant. So at this stage, there will be nothing done further. If the situation changes in the future, then that may be something to look at again in the future. But as of right now, this is where we're at, and we've investigated as much as we can, but there's not parking restrictions recommended at this stage. But we do genuinely thank the residents for their interest and involvement in this matter. So,
thank you, Councillor Gauchemarici. Councillor Lawrence.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Look, I'll be very brief. Columban Avenue is a very short street. It's only about 300 metres long from Woodlands Street through to Uplands Road, and the request was all about timed parking restrictions in 4-hour parking restrictions during 9 to 5, and it was found that obviously from the survey that which was done on February 13th, that area didn't require, or there wasn't a demand for this. 3 respondents wanted 4-hour time limit on the east side, and 3 respondents wanted time 4-hour on the west side of the street. So I can, I guess, see that the officers have had, there's been no clear support for the 4-hour limit, and therefore, you know, a preference for either side is not quite clear. So based on the current parking in Columban Avenue, council has decided, or council officers have decided to, in the report, to retain the current unrestricted parking in Columban Avenue. So I guess the only concern is, and when this original survey was done, it was just the start of COVID-19, and whether that had any impact on the parking from the commuters at Strathmore Railway Station in Columban Avenue. I personally think it was probably early enough not to have had an impact, but that would be just in the back of my mind as something that we need to be mindful of. Otherwise, no, I agree with my fellow ward councillor that with the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Any other councillor like to speak on this item? No, I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is, sorry, all those in favour is Councillor Sharp, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Cusack, Councillor Nation, Councillor Gatchmerici, Councillor Sorais, Councillor Lawrence, Councillor Marshall, and all those against is Councillor Sypek. Item 10.10 on the agenda is the 2019-20 performance statement and governance and management checklist. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Sorais.
Myself again, sorry, I'm very tired. I move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Sorais. And a seconder? Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Sorais, would you like to speak on the item?
Well, basically it's about governance and management, and just a couple of the characteristics of good governance. It's basically approving in principle the performance statement. So some of those characteristics of good governance, which, you know, adhere to the council, and I suppose that the council laws that should also perhaps take note of, are accountability, that local government has an obligation to report, explain and be answerable for the consequences of decisions it has made on behalf of the community it represents. Transparent, the community should be able to follow and understand the decision-making process. Follows the rules of law, decisions are consistent with relevant legislation or common law and are within the powers of council. Responsive, serving the needs of the community while balancing competing interests, demands and challenges. Equitable and inclusive, a community's well-being results from members feeling their interests have been considered by council and that all groups have the opportunity to participate in the process. Effective and efficient, making the best use of available people, resources and time for the best results for the community. And participatory, anyone affected by or interested in a decision should have the opportunity to participate in the process for making that decision. So that's just part of the whole process of what this motion is about. To some extent, there's probably some other issues that also need to be considered, but it's basically approving in principle the 2019-20 performance statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sorais. Councillor Lawrence.
Look, I think Councillor Sorais has covered the aspects of this report fairly comprehensively, and I mean, to me, it's all about accountability, and that's what governance is essentially trying to point out to those that are under that umbrella. And I think it's, you know, everybody's got to be accountable for what they do, say and act, and so yeah, I agree with the report wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Item 10.11 is Governance Rules and Governance Local Law 2020. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillors, item 10.11, Governance Rules and Governance Local Law 2020. Do I have a motion? Councillor Cusack.
Mayor, I'll move the officer's recommendation as the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. And do I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Marshall. Councillor Cusack, would you like to speak to the motion?
The report is very self-explanatory, Mayor and members of the public. It covers the governance rules in respect of the election period that's coming up, and the amendments that are raised because of the new Local Government Act. There's no point in a lot of discussion of this. It's a question of adoption and moving forward to be compliant.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Councillor Marshall.
Look, I'll just add, obviously, that we received no feedback when we had our documents out on consultation. So we didn't have to have the process where we heard the submissions. As Councillor Cusack indicated, these are important rules. So anyone who wants to be a councillor, familiarise yourself with them. Certainly the election period policy is really important for all of us to make sure that when we go into caretaker mode that we behave appropriately. And the idea is to try and create a level playing field and to the extent possible to not advantage incumbent councillors, and certainly to make sure that they don't use any resources that have been paid for by ratepayers in a way that is used for campaigning. So it's something that everyone needs to be really careful of. But otherwise, yes, people have had the opportunity to have their say, so I'm happy to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Item 10.12 is the public transparency policy. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Marshall.
Yes, I move a motion in the form of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. And a seconder, Councillor Nation. Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak on the item?
I will. So the new Local Government Act requires us to do a whole lot of things in a relatively short period of time. And this is one of the things that we are required to do, which is to adopt a new public transparency policy by no later than the 1st of September 2020. And the policy sets out various transparency principles that guide council in how we deal or set out the expectations of how council will behave in relation to the matter of transparency. The policy also describes the way that information will be made available to the public and also which type of information will be available. And obviously there are times where information can't be disclosed because it's confidential for a particular reason, but for the most part, it's about making sure that people have access to that information. I think we are very fortunate as a council because the reality is that we are extremely well placed to be able to respond to the requirements of the new Local Government Act and the policy. And as a consequence, there's a series of councillor initiated motions, particularly Councillor Nation and myself, but with the support of councillors sitting around here too. We've been a real leader in this space. I think we can honestly say that around disclosure, around transparency. And that's, again, something that we can be proud of and something that I hope future councillors also see fit to continue with. There's, again, the report sets this out and it's in the policy too as a schedule, so it will continue around a whole range of information above and beyond the expectations that are required of us that we disclose that other councils don't. So again, I think we can be very proud of that.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. And I did hear your whole speech. I just had to, working from home, I had to do the room shuffle, unfortunately. So I was listening, Sorry that my camera was off for that moment. Councillor Nation.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, one of the real positives that Councillor Marshall has mentioned about what we've managed to do as an organisation, both previous term and current term, is that when these new requirements under Section 57 of the new Act have come in, we already are doing a lot of them. I would think that particularly with councils in the West, and no disrespect to our Western neighbours, but we publish the most amount of information in a transparency sense than I would say any other council in the West. That's not saying that they're not transparent councils, but I feel we go above and beyond. And the reason we go above and beyond is to ensure that our community can have faith in what we're doing and that we're doing what we're doing for the right reasons. And always, whenever there is any unknown, then there is reasons for people to speculate about why decisions are made and so forth. So the report outlines the number of items we already do, the number of items we already do under 2.5, which is from that 27th of Feb 2018 governance and transparency website motion that Councillor Marshall put up. And that details a lot to do with us as councillors, as I said, to give the community reassurance that we're doing a good job and a job for the right reasons. But it also relates to information that should be publicly known, such as registers of property leases, registers of delegations, staff travel, etc. So I think we're already a great leader in this space, and that has meant that under these requirements, we've managed to adapt very quickly. I think this is something that we will continually be adding to, not because the Act requires us to or a level of government requires us to, but because we are a transparent council. Hopefully the next term the next group of councillors has just as much passion about ensuring that the organisation is transparent because, yeah, as I said, we know we do the best job when the community has faith in us, and they have faith in us when they can trust us. And so the motions outlined here and everything we've done to date, we should be proud of as a councillor unit. And I would definitely commend this policy to my fellow councillors and to the broader community. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Would any other councillor like to speak on this motion? I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Item 10.13 is the councillor expenses policy. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Sorais.
Yeah, happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Sorais. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Sorais, would you like to speak on the item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's basically about bringing council in line under the Local Government Act 2020, which is the Act. We're required to review the existing council expenses policy and adapt an updated policy no later than 1st of September 2020. That's been brought to council for approval. The issues basically are that the policy recognises the importance in investing in council development as well as supporting the reimbursement of necessary expenses, which allow councillors and committee members to perform their roles effectively. This is equally recognised by the new Act, which gives increased priority to compulsory candidate training and councillor induction training. The proposed councillor expenses policy does not significantly change what is currently encompassed in the existing council expenses and reimbursement policy, but it's proposed to bring the document in line with the new Act by updating its purpose and policy principles, to expand the policy to apply to members of delegated committees in addition to councillors as required by the new Act. It strengthens the provisions relating to childcare and other care-related expenses as required by the Act, strengthens the provisions relating to support the councillors and members of delegated committees with a disability, provide additional clarity around reporting on training and development expenses, expand the options for transport reimbursement, make other minor amendments, including to formatting and ordering of the document. So council receives quarterly reports summarising councillor expenses, which once resolved by council are placed on council's website. So from the second quarter of 2020 to 21 financial year, it's proposed to amend and simplify the categories presented in those reports. So there will be new categories. There'll be carer and other personal expenses, communications, conference, which covers training and development, entertainment and events, transport and travel, both interstate and international, but that doesn't happen very often in our council. So it's just tidying things up, putting them into different categories and just keeping in up to date with the current act that's been brought forward.
Thank you, Councillor Therese. Councillor Lawrence.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'll be very, very brief. This just brings us into the new act, and as Councillor Therese has already mentioned, she's just about covered everything that I was going to mention. So it just tidies everything up under the new Local Government Act 2020, which comes into effect on September 1st. So we're getting in with only 6 days up our sleeve, so nice and handy. Yeah, I mean, we've got a pretty strong policy already around council expenses, I would have thought, in this council, and I think that's a very good thing. There's not a lot that gets through to the keeper that shouldn't get through, and we certainly monitor and account for our expenditure where councillors are concerned. I like the fact that the new Act is encouraging to a degree the training of both candidates and new councillors through the induction program, and also that there is a recognition that councillors do need training, that they do need proper professional development, and that by doing this type of training, we're only going to end up with better councillors and better councils across the board. So I think that's a great thing. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? Okay, Councillor Cusack.
Just to put a footnote, of course, all councillor expenses in this council are published on a quarterly basis as it is, and I would hope that that would continue on and be part of the scene for the next council. Again, a testament to how far we are ahead of a lot of others.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Any other councillor? I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Item 10.14 is the legislative review of delegation framework and update to authorisations. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Therese?
I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation, but in item D, I'd like to get feedback from a councillor that wishes to nominate as a sub-delegate. So item D resolves to appoint the following councillors as members of the Place Naming and Civic Recognition Delegated Committee for the term of council effective from the date of this resolution. And we have Buckley Ward Councillor Sharp, Moonee Ward Councillor Cusack, and Rosehill Ward Deputy Mayor Councillor Sypek. So I'd like to know from Buckley and Moonee who would like to put their hand up to be a sub-delegate. I'm happy to be a sub-delegate in the Rosehill Ward, so I'd move the recommendation with those blanks to be filled in.
Councillor Therese, so you need to move a recommendation.
So I'll move the officer's recommendation with item D. 1, Buckley Ward Councillor Sharp. 2, Moonee Ward Councillor Cusack. 3, Rosehill Ward Councillor Sypek. I need a response from a councillor that wishes to nominate for Buckley Ward sub-delegate and Moonee Ward, and I will put my name in for a sub-delegate in Rosehill Ward.
Madam Mayor, I'm happy to.
So it's
Sub-delegate.
Councillor Sorace's motion. So you're moving Councillor Sorace at the sub. I would suggest Councillor Sorace to put the names in.
Well, then I'll put Buckley Ward Councillor as Sub-Delegate Councillor Lawrence, Moonee Ward as Sub-Delegate Councillor Marshall, and Rosehill Ward Sub-Delegate Councillor Sorace.
Okay, and thank you, Councillor Sorace. So that's what you have moved. Thank you. Do I have a, is everyone clear on what has been moved? If I can just get a general nod. Yep, thank you. And can I please have a seconder to Councillor Sorace's motion? Councillor Sharp. Councillor Sorace, would you like to speak to the item?
It's basically in regards to our instrument of delegations. I mean, look, I don't know what's going to happen after the next election, but obviously we need to have, as part of the recommendation, appointing councillors as members of the Place Naming and Civic Recognition Delegated Committee. So it's just that section that was blank that needed to have sub-delegate councillors' names put in there just to complete the recommendation. So that's why I moved the recommendation and raised that moment and put those names in.
Thank you, Councillor Sorace. Councillor Shah.
Thank you. This is basically another part of the Act that we need to comply with to ensure all our delegations are in hand. The new Act prohibits council from delegating to staff below the CEO level. So as such, we've had to review various instruments of delegation, and it is here before us, and happy to support.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Marshall.
Thank you very much for my nomination, Councillor Sorace, and I look forward to meeting in the next, how many days have we got left of this council term? So basically, there is not a chance that council could make all of the decisions that need to be made. So that's what we do in setting up delegations, have the CEO, certain powers delegated to the CEO, and then through this process, those powers are distributed along the chain, and it just allows for efficient decision making and reflects the enormous number of decisions that need to be made as a council. So I'm happy to support what's proposed, again, reflecting the requirements of the new Act. So we need to get this in place, because if we didn't have delegations in place, then the place would actually stop, because not all decisions can obviously be made in these council meetings. So happy to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? I saw Councillor Cusack's hand first.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I wasn't racing against you, Councillor Lawrence. It just happened. I think the next meeting of the Place Naming Committee is the 1st of September, and that's it. So it coincides with the last day that the current arrangements can apply. I just wanted to raise for Council, well, especially for people who might be still viewing online, C, which reflects the fact that this council is leaving Lead West as an organisation, that we have made a decision that at this stage, the City of Moonee Valley is not best served by its membership of Lead West, and that this motion obviously flags that. I don't know what has been actually said to Lead West at this stage about their future, but we'll leave that one in the hands of people who have a connection there. This doesn't mean that this council does not take seriously its connection with regions, both the north and the west, but it also has other considerations about, obviously, its relation with the inner suburban councils as well. And I'm sure that the next council in it very, very quickly will be moving to fill that void in terms of connections with regional decision-making groups and areas and regional groups, so that we can particularly advocate and work on behalf of our community at a higher level. But I just wanted to address that point if people were reading the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Councillor Lawrence?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to thank Councillor Sorais for the nomination as sub-delegate for Buckley Ward. Very honoured to have that role for the balance of this council year, which is only less than a month. And should the residents and ratepayers of the Buckley Ward see fit, I may be able to continue in that role in the new council year. However, no, I think this is pretty much tidying up the aspect of delegation under the new Act and bringing everything into a neat and effective process for the 1st of September when the new Act comes into play. And if I can just add that I was reasonably quick around the football ground in my younger days, Councillor Cusack, but these days not so fast, so our race would be very, very slow. Thank you.
Good one, Councillor Lawrence. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? No, I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. 10.15 is the Sport and Recreation Victoria Grant at Overland Reserve. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Sorais.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Sorais. And a seconder? Councillor Sypek. Councillor Sorais, would you like to speak on the item?
I will. It's in regards to the funding that we put in through Sports and Rec Victoria, the Infrastructure Fund program for 2021, and the capital budget to ensure council successfully delivers this project. So just a bit of the background. Sport and Rec Victoria infrastructure opened in late 2019 with applications due to be submitted by 14th of February 2020. A funding application for an upgrade to the floodlights of Overland Reserve Oval 2 was submitted as an eligible project in accordance with the draft 2020-21 budget. Included in the funding application was a letter from council committing to contributing to the project should the funding applications be successful. And obviously our funding has been successful, and I'd like to thank Sport and Rec Victoria for their generous and kind opportunity in providing some financial support to us. The floodlight upgrade at Overland Reserve Oval 2 is included in the Overland Reserve Master Plan from 2016. So this funding will go towards, we have budgeted for a total of 245,500. We were notified in July about the floodlight upgrade was successful in obtaining 130,000 through the local sports infrastructure fund. And council is required to deliver the floodlight project within 12 months of executing a funding agreement with Sport and Rec Victoria. So this all falls really nicely into place with this project, which is due for completion, I understand, at the end of November 2020 this year. So I think that that's a great opportunity, and I'd like to thank the government for helping to support us with this funding, and hopefully this will be a great project for the floodlight and on the second oval and part of the whole project at Overland Reserve.
Thank you, Councillor Sorais. Councillor Sypek. Councillor Sypek, sorry, you'll just have to do your thing with your microphone.
Oh, I was off mute, so but I just have to read it again. That's fine. Madam Mayor, look, we've had quite great success with Overland. As you're well aware, we had a lot of state funding coming towards the new pavilion that we lobbied for. I've been involved with this lobbying for the last 10 years to get this new pavilion done at Overland Reserve. And now, through our Sports Rec department, have done a great job in getting this grant for the lights for the second oval. This is actually a wonderful opportunity now, because we do, you know, with COVID being involved, it all stopped. But prior
Councillor Sypek, I think your sound has just cut out again. Stop, Councillor Sypek. No, try again.
Now, can you hear me?
Yep.
I was just saying,
10 seconds or so.
with our sports rec department doing such a great job in getting this grant, it was fantastic, because this is going to alleviate a lot of pressure in the next season, because we've had a lot more female teams come on board, and this will allow plenty of training time, and even utilising these lights at night time to play maybe a Friday night female competition. So this has been a great boost for us, and I'm hoping to try and if we keep going this way, Moonee Valley could virtually make every sporting oval to have night lights and future-proof the growth of all our sports within our community. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? No, I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Okay, councillors, the next item of business, we're up to notices of motion. 3.5 hours in, but we're getting there. So we're up to the notice of motions, and we do have two for tonight. So the first notice of motion is the removal of Strathnaver car park from the long-term capital works plan. And I call on Councillor Marshall. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, I would like to move that Council removes the Strathnaver proposed second car park adjacent to Mascoma Street from the long-term capital works plan.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. And do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Gauchemarici. Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak on the item?
Yes, I will. Thank you. And I'd like to say this is a matter that's been bubbling away for some time now, and for me it needs to be resolved. So as the motion indicates, this relates to a proposal that's in Council's long-term capital works plan for a second car park linked to the Strathnaver Oval on a site that's adjacent to Mascoma Street. Now, the proposed car park has been removed from various of other council documents, including the developer contribution plan. And so this really is the last piece in which it remains. I think all councillors know the area in question. I know numerous councillors have been on site more than once, so really do appreciate and understand the concerns that are being raised. And as I've reflected now for what has been many months, I've come to the conclusion that this is a project that should not proceed for a number of reasons, and I'll talk to those. Firstly, there are obviously the environmental reasons, and this is a part of Strathmore that is a really special part of Moonee Valley, and every time I go there, I just feel incredibly relaxed just even being in the environment. It has unique flora and fauna, and the prospects of covering that with some sort of hard surface like asphalt or concrete or whatever it might be, with removing trees, with removing vegetation, which would be needed to fit this car park as being proposed, it's really just inconsistent with so many of council's existing policies. It's inconsistent with 2040. It's inconsistent with the Green Action Plan. Certainly inconsistent with our plan to try and have our 30% tree canopy cover. A whole range of concerns arise from having those hard surfaces, including the heating effect. I'm really, as I've reflected on this, even more and more concerned about the potential runoff issues from having a car park. And there's a lot of information actually out there around the issues created by urban runoff. And so I'd encourage people who aren't aware about the concept and the issues that it creates to have a look at some of that stuff. And what you can see here is not just potential runoff issues with the flora and fauna that are in nearby proximity, but you can certainly see that real risk of pollutants ending up in the creek. And I think that's a real concern. It wouldn't take much at all. A heavy storm and that flooding risk that flows along, washing those pollutants down, is of real concern to me. We also know too, again, putting hard surfaces, we've spent a lot of money in various areas of Strathmore, and whenever we do anything around Strathmore, there's always a drainage issue that comes up. So again, putting hard surfaces in a place like this, you can only just imagine the potential flow-on effects, including my concerns around drainage. So the other thing that obviously is a significant concern is the financial perspective. And we've spoken as a councillor group repeatedly about the financial constraints that this council faces, which are only going to get worse for the next council. And in the past 8 or so years, council has invested in a number of projects related to Strathnaver, as we have in a whole range of other areas. Obviously the pavilion, the lights, the lower car park improvements. And from the information I've been provided, the lower car park improvements cost around about $900,000. And in doing so, they've increased the capacity of the car park significantly, and they have made it safer, which is a positive thing. But if you look at that actual upper car park and you look at having appropriate retention engineering in place, given the embankment, this will be a project that the cost will be absolutely enormous. It will be a project where there is an enormous risk of blowouts, because once we get into detailed engineering, as we've seen in a whole range of other projects, these additional costs just continue to accumulate, and it will be well and truly over $1 million. So when you start thinking in a constrained environment, financially constrained environment, is it appropriate to spend what would be well in excess of $2 million for 2 car parks in close proximity to each other for a sporting ground? Then I think the answer has to be no. If there are issues with parking, we know we've had concerns about parking. We've got obviously now the lower car park, which will be used. There are other alternatives around there. They might not be everyone's first preference, but that's the issue we have in Moonee Valley more generally, that sometimes people can't get something right out the front of their house or out the front of wherever, and that's just the parking challenges that we face in an area like Moonee Valley. And if we have participants coming from outside the local area, again, we need to think about things about saying, all right, how can we help you? Can we encourage you to hire our community buses? Can we encourage you to carpool? A whole range of things like that we need to get much smarter around, and we need to help provide assistance to groups to try and to walk if they're in close proximity, or use active transport, and for people who are coming outside the Moonee Valley area to try and encourage them to use other forms of transport.
Councillor Marshall, the time, I know you probably don't have a clock in front of you. Would you like a short extension of time?
Yeah, a really short extension. I'm almost finished, Mayor, so thank you for that. No problem. So we really need to think about things differently in this respect. It's an area, again, in my view, that should be rehabilitated, and you can certainly imagine planting out with Indigenous plants that could really go towards making a great contribution towards our creek canopy cover. And it is exciting to think about the prospect of what this area could become. And that will be something that would be for consideration by the next council if this is supported. But in terms of the enormous issues that this proposal raises, for me, that it's a no-brainer. It's just, we take it out and we look at having something occur in that space that is consistent, not inconsistent, with all of our council policies.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Gatchmarici.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to start first by thanking Councillor Marshall for bringing this motion forward, but also to Councillor Nation, because I know he had wanted to second it and let me. So thank you, Councillor Nation. Certainly when I think about this, there's a couple of things at play for me. Someone suggested during the week that by us not building a second car park, we would be limiting the growth of sport in our area. And I just want to call that out, because we will happily grow and foster sport in our area. And I don't think that us installing a second car park, or in this case, not installing a second car park, in any way impacts our interest in growing and developing sports. So I think that's a factually incorrect linkage to make. I'll try not to cover everything that Councillor Marshall covered. For me, we are in a very significant economic environment at the moment where we actively talk about us needing to make tough decisions in the money we spend, and that the money we spend needs to directly benefit the members of our community who most need it right now. And for me, I can't put my hand on my heart and say that asphalting a park is a good use of our money right now. So for me, that's a really big factor. But then above all of that, 2 years ago, I stood just over the bridge in Oak Park, but I stood and signed a giant cardboard memorandum of understanding on behalf of Moonee Valley Council. And the one document that Councillor Marshall didn't mention, so I get to, we stood up with 14 other organisations and agreed to prioritise the transformation and protection of the Moonee Ponds Creek through the Chain of Ponds strategy. So for me to stand on the pathway directly below this embankment and look up knowing that that entire embankment would need reinforcement and retaining, it would undoubtedly remove a number of the trees and species along there. And then to think about the environmental impacts of all of just the construction, let alone what occurs when you allow people to park there and the inherent rubbish that gets left there. For me, I can't put my hand on my heart and say that I want a car park there. So you add the environmental impacts, the importance of this area to our community, the importance of Moonee Ponds Creek to our community, and the financial impact. And it's a significant financial impact for not a significant long-term benefit when we actively say that we want our 20-minute neighbourhoods and we want people to start walking more, and we want people to actively think about other means of transport, whether that's riding their bikes or carpooling. I can't put my hand on my heart and spend that sort of money on a car park for not a significant use. So I am really pleased to second this motion, and thank you for bringing it forward. When we talked about last year removing the item from the budget and pushing it out a year, we talked about removing it from long-term capital works plan at the time, and I went back and my notes said that, and we said no, we'll just review it when it comes back to us, and the long-term capital works plan hadn't come back to us, so it's a nice way to tidy that up now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gauchmarici. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? No, so there is. Okay, Councillor Cusack.
So I don't rise. I'm sitting, I suppose, to support the motion. I think that there are some well, there's been some very reasonable points that have been made by obviously the mover and seconder of the motion. From my perspective as a Moonee ward councillor, but somebody who has actually visited the site on a number of occasions and well aware of it and walked it with local residents. My concern is that this car park becomes very much a single-use car park, and the extent and the cost of it and the dollar per car space is excessive. It's amazingly costly exercise, and I'm not sure that we can justify it in that sense. I mean, we've had recent battles, and I haven't been a saint in this space, but you know, we up there in Strathmore, there was the issue about the whether we'd spend a few bob to renovate the childcare centre, whether we'd put a quid on the table to fix up the playground that had been taken apart and all that sort of stuff. And here we are in a situation where we're potentially taking apart the natural area and creating, as Councillor Gauchmarici put it, a real problem for the Moonee Ponds Creek, and that's where I'm coming from. At least there's a bit of greening up your neck of the woods, but when you start to think about that whole chain of ponds, that rubbish ultimately ends up in down in Moonee ward. It gets caught around the bridge and it becomes that sludge and slurry that is just not wanted. And anything to actually retain the creek's integrity and potentially grow it up in your neck of the woods will ultimately help us at the other end as we get rid of the concrete drain in the years to come. I think also that the expense of design and all the rest of it is going to be way beyond the $1 million that were estimated. I mean, the first car park became a very expensive exercise that seemed to keep gobbling up cash, and I don't know how many times we were approached at council to add a few bucks more, and the pot just kept coming out all the time. So I'm really, really conscious of the fact that this is a very difficult site to build anything. I think without, and I suppose I'm going to be cheeky, but there is another car park that's not all that far, and there are ways and means that people have for getting in and around there. And I do applaud you, Councillor Gattamarucci, again for calling out the issue about sport and not supporting it. I think that we've spent a significant amount in and around that neighbourhood and supported the sporting clubs and would continue to do so. But I don't know that we necessarily have to do it on the basis of supporting them so that they can park cars and just drive in and drive out and not have a consideration about what happens for the rest of the time in the neighbourhood. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Any other councillor on this item? Councillor Thrice.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Just in relation to this, I have had mixed emails from both users of the sporting facility with the football club and with residents who are living in the neighbourhood, and of course at our public forum where we had presentation from a couple of, well, a resident and also someone who spoke on behalf basically of the Indigenous community, is how it came across to me. And that's it. I think that there needs to be a balance somehow here, because if we're looking at what the recommendation says, that we remove the Strathnaver proposed second car park adjacent to Macoma Street from the long-term capital works plan, it would be nice to get a report back to say, then what are the alternatives? What do we do? And if councillors are of the mind to revegetate and to put some more greenery and enhance that area and take it back to how it was or should be, what are those costs associated with that as well? So I can see, Councillor Marshall, I appreciate your motion that you've put forward here, but I still think that we need to perhaps, it's been a really awkward year, and I know this has gone on for a long time, but the fact that we haven't seen the actual usage and the total amount of people that do and don't use. Look, in my personal view, I don't think it's the best site for putting a car park. So I agree in that instance, but I think we need to look at what the alternatives are, and perhaps if we could get a report back to say, what are the alternatives, what can we do, or how can this be fixed? And I understand, I know that there are other car parks. I've been down there, I've looked at the site and everything else around it. So yeah, I think that there needs to be further investigation into it as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Thrice. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
We can hear you, yep.
Terrific. I'm having a bit of trouble with my mic for some reason. I was in two frames of mind about this one as well, and what Councillor Thrice made sense. And then I was just reading through my notes while I was listening to everyone. And I remember when this came up last time that we were gonna, we deferred the upper level car park, and we'll see how the lower car park would work out over the next 12 months. But due to COVID and the season being cancelled, I don't think we have that information to see whether the lower car park will absorb all the parking issues down there. So what Councillor Thrice made sense, you know, maybe this is not.
Councillor Sypek, your sound again.
Is that better?
Yep.
Yes, my mic, I don't know what's going on. As I was saying, we were supposed to, we deferred this to see whether the lower car park would cater for all the problems, parking problems during the year. But because of COVID, that has now been unable to get that data. So what Councillor Thrice made sense, and you know, if we deferred this to get a report after a full season would be good. But you know, maybe this is not the right fix for a car park there. Maybe there could be another alternative. Maybe we should explore what other options there are. And yes, look, there is the car park across the river over there, but I don't think this is dead and buried. There could be other alternatives. And the savings that we actually do make there, I had a chat to a resident of Avondale Heights, and he suggested, why don't we use the savings that we have there and do environmental initiatives in the Strathnaver Reserve. And I thought that was a great idea. So I would like to see that money put back into that area to cater for environmental friendly plans down there. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Slypeck. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Lawrence.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Look, I've been up to the Mascoma Street residential area and spoken with the residents, and we've walked extensively along the creek, which is a very appealing part of our Strathmore area, and probably the nicest part of the Strathmore, creek area. Far better than the concrete drain that turns the Moonee Ponds Creek turns into down in the bottom end of our municipality. And point taken from Councillor Cusack that you do end up with probably a lot of the shall we say, corruption that goes down that creek, which is unfortunate. Look, I think in all honesty that asphalting an area on Mascoma Street for the use of a car park, and asphalt, as we know, is an oil-based product and tends to melt on hot days, and you end up with runoff when storms come along and cars drip oil and all the rest of it. So, of course, it's going to end up in the creek one way or the other, because that's the lowest point from that car park area. So I think in reality that it's probably not the best spot for a car park, would be my comment. It's probably convenient, but it's not the best spot. And there are potentially other spots, but I'm not a car park construction person, so I would have to leave it to others to look at that. I am mindful of the fact that we don't have a due diligence done on, because of the COVID situation, in terms of how much usage the lower car park is, the one that's been constructed, is going to get, and that does sort of concern me a little bit. However, I don't like the position of where this car park's going, and as such, I'm not against pulling it from the Capital Works program. I see that as probably a positive for the area. Can be used for, some of the money can be used that we would save, as Councillor Slypeck mentioned, for environmental reclamation for the area. I noticed there's been some dumping of concrete and other bits and pieces from who knows who, illegally dumped, I might add. So maybe that area can be reclaimed back into a nice environmental and some tree planting and the like that is suitable for the area. I take the point that the financial impact during this time is difficult, and for council to swallow that sort of money on a car park is probably a little out of the way. I also note that just about every other sporting facility in the municipality has extensive car parks, but this is not the right spot for a car park, and I agree with that point.
Councillor Lawrence, just so you're aware of the time, would you like a small extension?
I will have 15 to 20 seconds if I could, and therefore,
no problem.
Therefore, those funds can be pulled from the long-term capital works program and be used to, in these difficult times, not only environmental but supporting my passion, and that's business. And we have a lot of businesses that are doing it hard in our municipality. So I know it's not connected with the actual issue of the motion, but money does move around in circles, and that is an issue. But yes, that's all I've got to say on the matter. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Any other councillor? Councillor Nation.
Thanks, Mayor, and I will keep it brief. And Councillor Gauci-Marici, I'm glad that you did second it, because you spoke to the area with probably more knowledge than I would have. So I endorse basically everything that's been said so far, particularly by the mover and the seconder. when you look at it, this just a simple desktop look at this project, it just is inconsistent with so much of what MV 2040 is about. The hard surfaces right up against some of our most important, well, one of our, and it's only a small creek, but one of our most important waterways, and with it the flora and fauna that come along that creek. It's just it just would not be consistent with everything that we are trying to do as a council. The effort, time, money we're put into respecting the natural environment, and sending the wrong message as well. Add to that the amount of money that's been spent down there already, and the financial constraints that we now find ourselves in 2020, but also that we'll undoubtedly be still experiencing in 3 or 4 years' time. So thank you, Councillor Marshall, for getting this notice of motion before us in this term of council. And I think this is just a reasonable and logical way forward. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Any other councillor? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. No. Councillor Marshall, would you like to close?
Look, I won't say too much because I think I'm hearing comments that are supportive of the motion. A couple of comments that might express a preference for getting a report, but I think speaking for myself, I don't need a report to tell me that this is not a good idea. That the idea of spending over $1 million on a car park in a highly sensitive and valued ecological area in a council situation where we're under significant economic and financial constraints, where we've just spent $900,000 very nearby. Yeah, I think that those all put together make the argument for themselves. And, you know, note obviously that the other car park proceeded, as we had the information earlier tonight. We haven't had robust data in relation to this. So I think on balance, people were happy to proceed to spend the $900,000 in those circumstances. So I would think that people should be happy to not proceed to spend large amounts of money, which, as councils have indicated, could go to a whole range of other areas. I certainly, if I had the ability in a notice of motion, would love to be able to direct it to other areas, but that will be something for the next council to be considering.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. So I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Now, item 11.2 on the agenda is the notice of motion or refusal to participate in the National Redress Scheme to support victims of child sexual abuse. And I call on Councillor Marshall.
Thanks, Mayor. Mayor, I'd like to move that Council receives a report regarding a proposal for any institution that refuses to participate in the National Redress Scheme that supports victims of child abuse to be ineligible. That should be a colon. A, for council grants or support of any kind. B, to use council facilities. C, to participate in Moonee Valley Council run community events. And D, to receive a permit to hand out information on council owned or operated property.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Cusack. Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak on that item?
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I will, in the hope that this motion actually becomes redundant if supported. So the National Redress Scheme, as I'm sure councillors and people will be aware, was part of the response the Royal Commission into institutional responses to child sex abuse. And many of us have heard the horrific stories of abuse, of cover-up, of condoning and allowing sexual abuse to go on in these organisations. And the Redress Scheme sets up a system of support. You know, it's not without its flaws, but financial support and counselling and other support. So institutions which were named in the Royal Commission report or in an application received by the Redress Scheme are expected to join the scheme. and those that don't are publicly named, and you can find that information just via a quick Google search. And it's really important to note too that our federal and state governments have made some really strong statements, and Prime Minister's made statements, others too, flagging possible sanctions against organisations that don't sign up to the scheme when they should. And you know, I think that is entirely reasonable and entirely fair, because these organisations failed to protect our most vulnerable. They failed to protect children and allowed the most horrific abuse to occur. And those children have paid all of their life. Some have paid with their lives, and they should not be allowed to shirk their responsibilities anymore. And the sanctions that have been mentioned include a range of things, including the removal of their charitable status, which, you know, we all know that religious institutions receive very generous tax exemptions. So we in part help fund or subsidise their activities. The sanctions also contemplate not being able to tender for government work and a range of other potential sanctions. So, as I said, I hope this notice of motion becomes redundant, but the reality is at the moment we do have organisations in Moonee Valley that haven't signed up to the redress scheme. And so this motion is actually asking for a report to consider a variety of potential actions that we at the local government level can consider if those entities don't agree to be part of the scheme. And in putting up this notice of motion, I would like to acknowledge the work of Councillor Jake Kehoe from the City of Knox. He was the one who actually saw this idea on Facebook, and I think he has either just done it or is about to do it at Knox. So I think it's a fabulous idea, and I think all levels of government should do what they can and use what leverage they've got to try and make sure that these institutions do the right thing.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Cusack.
Councillor Marshall finished where I want to continue. We're the third level of government in this country, and it's absolutely necessary that we express a level of consistency and solidarity with the decisions that have been made, both by state and federal governments in this area. As Councillor Marshall said, they're not always necessarily strong or vigorous or the best examples of the decisions that can be made to support people who have been abused in institutions and in other ways. But it is important that we as a council do a couple of things here. One is that we need to be able to say to our community, those people in our community who have been harmed in this way, that they are safe in our community, that their health and well-being is absolutely paramount, and that we wouldn't, as a council, take their money and put them in and put it into areas where organisations who haven't come to the party about addressing the issues of this level of abuse or this type of abuse are not prepared to make the effort to change. I think the other important thing about this is that we can't ignore these organisations from a council management and operational perspective. Our officers need very, very clear guidance around this. I don't want an officer to be put into a position where they're trying to guess whether it's right or wrong, or whether they're having to search into their own private morals and bag of principles that they carry to say that somebody or some organisation can or can't be at a function or be or able to use our resources, etc. The people of Moonee Valley expect a damn sight more from us as leaders. And so I just want to put it on the stump that what we're doing now is supporting our staff and making it easier for them so that they actually understand that there is a policy and a position. I mean, we can fix up the actual fancy words around it in the future. I hope the next council does pick up that. But there is a critical issue here about A, our staff, and B, the people who have been hurt. And I'm not putting that in any priority order, but I have a number of friends in this municipality who are struggling, and they're older men like me who have just never got over this sort of thing. And I'm sure where it ranges across all ages and gender, it's not a simple thing. It's a fact of life for a lot of people. And this council, as I said, as the third tier of government, needs to stand up and be counted. Simple.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Sorais.
Madam Mayor, thank you, Councillor Marshall, for bringing this to the council, and thank you for bringing it to our attention. I was a little bit surprised when you'd mentioned that there are organisations in Moonee Valley that haven't signed up for this scheme. That kind of horrifies me, absolutely horrifies me. I'm aware of a lot of people in our community, and male and female, that have been sexually abused as a child, and it is horrific. What I just want to clear up is, in your motion, it says that council receives a report regarding a proposal for any institution that refuses to participate in the National Redress Scheme that supports victims of child abuse to be ineligible for all of those issues. Is that indicating that we have a register of, or a report that comes back where there is a register of those who have not, or that refuse to participate in that scheme, that would come back? Or is it having those noted so that they cannot have access to items A, B, C, and D?
Councillor Marshall.
Clarification, I guess.
No, that's all right. So it would be expected that there'd be a report back setting out the potential implementation and whether there are any issues of concern, because again, if you're going to implement something like this, which deprives an institution of the ability to do certain things, again, as a matter of natural justice, you'd write out to them, you'd give them some notice that this is the sort of thing that you're proposing, so that they could make decisions accordingly. And just to double check that in this, there is nothing that will potentially be a matter of risk for council. So that's the view. I mean, the information about who hasn't signed up is out there. As I said, I hope that all do. You know, you'd hope that this could be a relatively simple report, and then it can be a matter of adopted policy for council, and organisations have noticed that this is what we're proposing, and if they choose to see that and ignore and not participate, then they're aware of the consequences. I hope that explains, Councillor Sorais.
It does, yeah. Great, no, absolutely, 100% support. Thanks.
Councillor Sorais, you'd finished speaking on the item? Yep. Would any other councillor like to speak on the item? Councillor Lawrence.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Look, I wholly support this 100%, and nothing makes my blood boil more than when I hear stories of child sexual abuse, it just is so foreign to my thinking that I can't even get my head around it, to be quite honest, other than the fact that it does make me extremely disappointed and angry. But no, I support this 100%, and if we can give some ability to ensure that organisations are accountable for the way they who they employ, how they behave, and so forth, then it's a great thing. I have done not a lot, but I've done some courses in relation to this very fact, and it's the very need is addressing those. When I say courses, I mean training in the whole process, not for any other reason. So I think it's a great thing, and I applaud it. So well done, Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Any other councillor? Councillor Sypek.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I too applaud Councillor Marshall for bringing this to Moonee Valley's attention. This is a smart move. This is a great move, and I fully support the motion. This is something that I think all councils should do, because a lot of councils do have grants. And if I could make a suggestion to Councillor Marshall, maybe to inject it, that we that the new council present this motion to the MAV, to the state conference, and to the ALGA, which is the Australian Local Government Conference, in the future. So it's only just a point form, but we can always do that later if you don't want to insert it now, Councillor Marshall.
Was that
Yeah, Councillor Sypek, are you moving an amendment?
I was just making a suggestion, but if you want me to move an amendment, I think just 2 point forms just to push this to the MAV and to the ALGA.
So sorry, just 1 second. So Councillor Marshall wouldn't be able to add it to the notice of motion, but I'm happy to get the amendment right. So you want an extra dot point to read? For the next council to put this up as a motion to the Municipal Associations of Victoria, and then on to ALGA, which is the Australian Local Government Association as well. And on to ALGA.
Can I, a point of clarification, I wonder, Councillor Sypek, whether we might word it so to give consideration based on the report, just to make sure that, if there were any issues that were to come out of the report that might be of concern, that way we've got it there. So that's what we want to do. Once we've ticked off all those any potential risk issues, then absolutely. So is that
done?
Right? Yep.
100%.
So I think that point of clarification is sort of saying maybe something like that would be good, but could be ticked off when the report comes back. You're all right with
100%. 100%.
Okay, so no amendment at this stage, correct?
Or an amendment that's
No,
slightly
amendment.
varied.
Oh, you are sorry. Okay, sorry. In that case, if you could just clarify, just so we get the wording correct, as in it's an amendment, exactly what it would be.
I think Councillor Marshall's probably got the wording. Can you just repeat what you just said, Councillor Marshall?
That after receipt of the report and consideration of its contents, the council blah blah as per.
Probably won't be able to put blah blah in. So that after, I know it's getting late, councillors, we're so close. So that after receipt of the report, that council, and consideration
of its contents, that council, John, Councillor Sypek's words that followed.
To MAV, ALGA.
That council put forward motion.
Present this motion to the MAV and to the ALGA.
Present this motion to the MAV and ALGA. Yep. Can I just get confirmation from governance that they've got that amendment?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, governance. So that is the amendment that has been moved. Is there a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Nation. Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak on the amendment?
Look, I think we've all pretty much spoken on it, and the amendment is just basically making this statewide, so all the state councils, and then hopefully presenting it to all the Australian councils throughout the whole of Australia at the ALGA.
Yep, thank you, Councillor Sypek. And Councillor Nation on the amendment.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I think it's definitely maybe treading on Knox's toes, but they may be presenting something similar, and if there's two of us presenting similar, then it probably only adds more weight to it as a motion. And it may also be, it may also give other councils the idea to bring it back to their own council, because as Councillor Marshall mentioned, it was hearing Jake's motion that was coming up, and then obviously that realisation that that's a good idea and something that can be applied here at Moonee Valley. So it can only be a positive that if us or Knox or even more councils bring this as a motion to the MAV or ALGA, then it's for the betterment of everyone. So fully support this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Would anyone else like to speak to the amendment? Okay, I will put the amendment to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. So we'll now go back to the substantive. Councillor Sypek, had you finished speaking to the substantive motion?
Yeah, look, I think I've pretty much said everything that needs to be said.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Would anyone else like to speak to the substantive motion? Okay, I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Okay. Now the next item of business is urgent business. Councillors, do we have any items of urgent business tonight? No. Delegates' reports? No. Confidential reports. Now the next item of business is confidential reports, and there is one confidential report this evening. Councillors, can I have a motion that the meeting be closed to members of the public in accordance with section 66(2) of the Local Government Act 2020 to allow for consideration of confidential information under section 3(1)(f) personal information, being information which, if released, would result in the unreasonable disclosure of information about any person and their personal affairs, and in this case, the CEO recruitment and/or remuneration matters. Please, moved Councillor Sorais, seconded Councillor Nation. I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. So 10:40 at night, it's been a long one for all of those who've been tuning in at home, but thank you for sticking around. We will see you all next time. So councillors, obviously, please stay online, don't go anywhere. But to the public who are watching, see you later.